Yerushalmi Megillah Daf Yates Amid Aleph. We're on the bottom, about 10 lines up on Yudches and Beis, about two dots. A little bit of a complex Gemara, so strap on your seatbelt and let's get going. Paran Nisrafim, Esin Nisrafim, Echen Nisrafim. So when during this man of Gilgal and Adabama, during the Mishkan, the department of Srafim, which we're talking about, the parallel Davar Shal Tzibur, or the Sira Avodas Chavim, which are doing that to be burnt. So when the Mishkan was around, that had to be burnt by Kodesh. But Malcolm Tar, it says, right? Mechutzlam, so it's not by Kodesh. It says, Vahitzi's kol apar, and Mechutzlam Achnel Mokoim Tahar. So that had to be in a place that Tahar. But what about in Gilgal, let's say? At Obama, where did they burn it then? So Gemara says even al gabe kever could even done al gabe kever. There's no Indian to have it in a Malkam Tar. Fine. Zegt the Mishnah Mimada Tanina, zegt the Gemara weiter Mimada Tanina, ein bein bama gedol bama ketana el psachim. So obviously we're holding over here that there's no difference. There's no difference between a bama gedol and a bama ketana, only psachim. In other words, a carbon pesach had to be brought only in the bama gedol. But besides that, both the private bama and the bama gedola were both they were the same. And we see this because we see that even param and esrafim would be brought by Bamas given. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had what the Gemara just mentioned now. So now, zok the Gemara weiter. The only difference is between a Bama Gdol and Bama Ketana is the carbon pesach. Otherwise, they're exactly the same. What's brought on one is brought on the other. Now, udaloik Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda amachatas upesach liyachid bebama gedola and ein chatas upesach liyachid b'maktana. So see, there's actually an additional difference besides the carbon pesach. You see, also Rabbi Yehuda holds that a chatas is not brought on a bama ketana. So we see, so he holds there two differences. Besides pesach, he also have a chatas which is not brought on a bama ketana. Tani, Rabbi Yehuda. Kol ma shayochid v'atzibo makriv ba'oil moyed shebemidbar hu makriv ba'oil moyed shebegilgal. All the karbanis that a yochid and a tzibor brought while they were in the midbar, those same karbanis were brought in when they were in Gilgal, and that would include even a chayvis yochid, like a chatas, would be brought on the Bama Gedolah in Gilgal. I'm sorry, whoops, I skipped. Ma bein oil moed middle oil moed begilgal. So what's the difference between oil moed of the midbar and oil moed of Gilgal? So moed midbar oil het bama. While the Yidden were in midbar, there was no, you couldn't make your own bama. Oil moed Gilgal hoyle het bama. But about the time that the Mishkan was in Gilgal, then you could have your own private bama. Obama said, so, but you were limited in your bama ketana and your own private bama. What could you bring on it? So Gemara says that you could only bring your oil and shlamim. The Chachamim say that kol shema shatzibor makriv ba'oil moyed. Okay, take out the word. Yachid. So kol mashat tzibur makriv ba'oil moyed, makriv ba'oil moyed. Only what the tzibur brings shebemidbar, makriv ba'oil moyed shebegilgal. But not the yachid. In other words, chatas and an asham of yachid was not brought in Gilgal. So now to change the gears a little bit, my time at the Rabbanon, where did they get this from? So where did they learn this from? That in Gilgal they only brought they would only bring a shlamim or an oila, but not a chatas or an asham. So where did they get that from? So if loy sasu, so they're quoting the pasuk. It says that the full pasuk is we're going to quote this pasuk a couple of times. Loy sasun kachol asher nachnu oisim poyayim ish kol yoshav be'enav. So loisasu means begilgal. Don't do in Gilgal. K'chol asher nachnu osim po hayom in the midbar. Ma tasu sham. So what do you do if you're not going to do everything that we do in the in the midbar? So what can you do? Ma tasu sham. Dava shuba lidei yashrus. Now it says ishkla yashar. So dava shuba lidei yashrus. Knows what's straight to you. What's fitting to you. Vezazu. Zu oila shlamim. Those are things that you can be that are nidav and nidav. So those are things you can bring on the bama in Gilgal. So the Chachamim are learning that this pasuk is referring to the bama in Gilgal as opposed to the bamas yachid, your own private bama. Now, my time. Now here we go to the review. Where does review to get it from? So he says, "B'makom asher ish hayosha be'enav yaseh," in a place where you do what you want, and in a place where you do what you want, that's referring to that's referring to the yachid in his private bama, right? Do whatever you want in your private bama. So loy sasun over there, loy sasun kechol asher anachnu oisim po hayom. Over there, you can't do what we're doing today. So just before we get there's a fundamental difference between the way Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan learn. Rabbanan learn is going on the Bama in Gilgal and it's telling you there, right? You can only do ish kol hayasher be'enav. According to Rabbi Yehuda, we're focused on the Bamas Yachid. And being focused on Bamas Yachid, we're limiting what you can do in the Bamas Yachid. But in the Bama Gilgal, you can do everything. Umat Sham, what can you do? What, yes, can you do in the Bamas Yachid? Davu Shabbat de Yashris, Bezuzuz Oil Shlamim. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, you have your own little Bama and be makriv on it and Oil Shlamim. But only an Oil Shlamim. You're limited to that. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hayachid Huzer, Vayachid Huter. Right, so there's azhara here for the yachid alav, and there's a heta here as well. So huzar huzar bibamasai. So he's being warned, like we said, in his own private bama broj gagoy. And Vahuta, we're being mad to him, was saying, okay, um, don't bring all the things that we're doing here in the midbar. Don't do those on your private bomber. What instead can you do? Vahuta loyal shlamim. That you can do. Why? Because again, that's yasha. You do what's yasha, what's fit in your eyes. In other words, what the voluntary carbon. So that you can do. Rabbanon Amri Af Hatzibo Vayachid Huzru. They say, like we said before, that the Bama and Gilgal, which is a chiddush, right? The Bama and Gilgal, they're saying, no, you can't do whatever you want to do. And in fact, you can't. I'm sorry, not that you can't do whatever you want to do. You could that loy sasun everything that we're doing today in the midbar you cannot do in the Bama in Gilgal. Tzibur hotem. So there's some heta here for the tzibur. And Yachid is lon beisur. Yachid remains, lon is asleep, so remains with his iser. So what they're saying is that the loisasun is going on, like we said, on the on the bum of Gilgal, and we're saying don't do. And as this applies to everybody across the board, to Yachid, to Tzibur, everybody, loisas, you cannot do everything that we're doing in the Midbar, you cannot do it in Gilgal. But then we go and we say, you know what? But kol yasha be'enav. So what can you do? You can do what's yasha. So what's yasha you can do? So the tzibur can do. Right. Once when it says in the pasuk ish kol hayasha be'enov, so yasa, no, yasa you could do. So what can you do? It just told me don't do something. They didn't tell me yes, go do something. So what's going on over here? So what we came to answer is we're saying ish kol hayasha be'enov yasa is that what remains usher is I'm allowing you to do what's yasher be'enov. What's yasher be'enov? What's yasher be'enov is voluntary karbanis. That you can do. But mandatory karbanis, you cannot do. So what comes out according to Racham? According to Racham, what comes out is that the tzibur can do both, right? It can do chayvos, right? The tzibur can do chayvos, but when I went and was matir the yachid, I was only matir to do what's yasha. What's yasha is nadav and nadavos, and therefore, in the bama of Gilgal, now the bama gedal of Gilgal, they could only bring a yachid can only bring, let's say, a shlamim or an oili, cannot bring a chatas or an asha. That's the chachamim's shita. Fine. Tani b'shem Reb Shimon, zok the Gemara weiter. Hatzibur einoi mevi ela ma shekava olav hakasav. So the tzibur can only bring what the Torah tells you you have to bring, right? So certain kabbanis that you have to bring at certain times, like a carbon pesach, you have to bring, right? For example, so there, so anything similar to a carbon pesach, and it's a chayvus shekavu alehem zman, that you can bring. So according to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, at least what he was learning is Reb Shimon is actually more machmir than than the Rabbanim. So he's saying is ma beineu. So what's the difference, practically speaking, between the Chachamim and Reb Shimon? They sound to be almost saying the same thing. So the difference is a par helm davar shel tzibur. So param davar shel tzibur is a carbon of the tzibur. So according to Chachamim, carbon tzibur you can bring. It's only a yachid that was restricted. It's a chayv on the tzibur to bring a parallel davar. However, it's not kavua's man. Right? There's no set time for it, and therefore, according to Rishimon, you can bring it. Rabbi Yosef Omer nidvas hatziba b'neim. The oil ketzam is be'er. So if there was money sitting around the kupis and the mizbeach was batal, so they would be makriv an oila on the mizbeach. So the mizbeach shouldn't just sit and be batal. The ketzam mizbeach. So so that carbon again is a carbon at tzibah. So according to Chamim, it's not restricted. You can bring it, but according to Reb Shimon, it's not kavur zman. So therefore, you cannot bring it. Okay, Tani. Echad ish looking where right echad ish isha can be makriv in a bama. So it's egalitarian when it comes to bama service. Both men and women can do the service. Amri Yochanan less kanisha. Because ish kasur pasha again, it says in that pasuk we quoted earlier, ish kol yosher ben v'yasser. Yochanan says no, it can't be women. It's limited to men. Tani af and aziris. Even in aziris, you can bring on the bama according to everybody because it's yasha. In other words, it's a voluntary carbon. So according to the Chacham, you can bring it on the bama gedayla, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, you would be allowed to bring a carbon even on bama ketana. Rabbi Yochanan again, less kan Naziris. Why? Because Naziris is chayvehi. The Enochanami is true. You volunteer to be a Nazir. That's true. The carbon, however, is not voluntary. The carbon is a hechatimtza of Naziris, and therefore you cannot bring it on the bama. According to Chacham on the bama gedal, according to Rabbi Yehuda on the bama ketana. Tani afan esachim, that when you bring a carbon on a bama, on a private bama, or according to Chacham in the Gilgal, you bring the sachim too. Am Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yibon man tanan the sachim. The like Rabbi, whoever is the one who learned this, that says also the sachim is not going like Rabbi. Tani Rabbi Omer ni af mishnichnas Yisrael la'aretz ein the sachim krevim ela mi befnim. The sachim are only brought in the Beis Hamikdash, not anywhere else. My timer. Where do I see this from? It says Ba'kodesh haseich neser sheich al Hashem. Right? So Ba'kodesh has to be done Ba'kodesh. Enksi beloisase elo mi bifnim. So the Gemara says that someone who's shoichet amala b'chutz, right? So it seems to be when there's a pnim, then there's an isser of being shoichet amala b'chutz outside. How about minay mi b'chutz? What about at a time that b'shas let's say bamas gilgal? That how do you know when somebody goes, he's makriv a carbon tzibor, right? On his own private bama. How do you know he's over? Nishmin and Ado. We can see from over here. Minayin shoichet. Minayin shoichet. Pesach. Bebamas yochid. How do we know that somebody goes and shechts a carbon Pesach and the bamas yochid? Bishas, just skip the next word. Isser, so skip Obama Siba. So minayin l'shoichet Pesach, bebamas yochid b'shas Isser bama shu oive belois aseh. How do I know when a person shechts a carbon Pesach, right, on his own private outside, we'll call it for now, right? That he's over in a lois aseh. How do I know? Talmud loy meloi sucha lizboich es hapasach ba'achat. Ba'achat. You can't shecht ba'achad. Mashmos is ba'achad is in a singular place. No, it's not with the tzibur. You're going to shecht everybody's going to Gilgal, and you're shechting your carbon somewhere else. So says, I don't understand. Onush koris v'atam ha'achin? One second, you just told me b'shasis abamis. Shasis abamis. I can't bring any carbon outside of the of the call it of the public place, and I have to bring with everybody else. So if it's Shasis Abamis, the Onush is Karis, and he told me there's a lav, whatever a lav, there's Karis. So Shimon Lakish Amar B'Shoichet Mishei Shois Lamailon. It's talking about Yeshechtit Mishei Shois Lamayim, but Shalol Lishma. B'shas heter abama. What happens? You went and you shechted what should be a carbon pesach. You did it shalol lishma, and you did it b'shas heter abama. And we're telling you that such a case, even though you'll tell me, well, it was shalol lishma, maybe it's of a shlamim. No, you're oivet. It's a lois I say. This is 1 second. Then v'loma oimi b'shas iser abama. But you just told me b'shas iser abamas. What did you come now? B'shas heter abamas. Says no, no, no. Gemara says when we said before b'shas isur bama, we meant to say b'shas isur bama soy. No, it's your bama is also because this particular carbon, and you're allowed to have a bama, but this particular carbon, in this case the carbon pesach, can't go on your private bama. So v'lamali shaloi l'shmai. So what did tell me shaloi l'shmai? Just come out straight and tell me straight out if you shecht a carbon pesach on your private bama, right? You're over a loisasa. Why don't you just tell me that? So the Gemara says, "Shaloi tomer shlomim hein vein ksherin." So you shouldn't come in. Oh, no, no, no. I was really shechting. I meant to shecht. I know it looks like a pesach, but it really was meant to be a shlomim, and therefore it's kosher. The Gemara says, and furthermore, so therefore we told you that no, no, no. We understand what you're doing. You're taking a pesach and you're trying to fool us and say it's a shlomim. So we're telling you, no, you're over a lav. Void min hadah. And I'll tell you even and Void min hadah. That if you shecht on a bama shlo l'shmo l'achar chatzos that it's pasul. Void min hadah yachlim shachtam mishay shos l'mailon. There's a few gerses here. So just 1 second. Yehei yes. Void min hadah yachlim shachtam mishay shos l'mailon yehei kasher. So this is a quote from Raisa. So this is 1 second. What does that mean exactly? Maslicha mishay shos ulamaton. You tell me yay kosher? In other words, the price is quoting Vayman Ado Yochel Meshach Mishay Shos Lamal yay kosher. What? And Mishay Shos Lamata. In other words, what that's kosher? Obviously, that's not kosher. So what are we talking about? Because that's too early. Scratch that. Not that's too early. Pshat is that what I mean. If we're talking about over here, or everything that we're addressing over there in a private bama. So you're telling me, so that the brisa comes and tells me, so maskal meimet with misheshos ulamaton yehi kosher. We're talking about a bama. Why is it kosher? It's possible. So obviously, loy, what are we talking about? Shaloi lishmai. You're talking about over here is that we're going to shecht it. Shaloi lishmai. You're telling me, well, what I really meant to say is I'm shechting as a shlamim. That's what I had in mind. So telling you, no, no, we understand what you're trying to do it, and it's possible. Fine. Amr Rabbi Yossad, Amru Shlomo Abba Machmas Pesach Ksherim Bibama. Shlomo Abba Machmas Pesach. Actually, kosher b'bama, because otherwise, what's the whole mean over here? Now, if you have, let's say, you had a carbon pesach, it was avos manai, you replaced it, you got a different one, and now you're bringing it really as a shlamim. So, we're saying over here is that ksherim, that this shlamim that's coming, the glada pesach, is kosher b'bama. And the chiddush is, even though, like we said, a pesach cannot be brought on a bama ketana. But since this so even though that's the case, but now it has a din of a shlamim, and you can go ahead and bring it on a bama. So Freiti Gemara, what about oila bo machmas asham? Right? What about an oila bo machmas asham? So asham again, we said you cannot bring on a bama ketana. But what about if you have a similar case where you had a carbon asham and you used a different animal. So now you're left with this animal that you already designated as an oila. So let me bring it as an oila. Can I bring it now on the bama katana? So maushtik sheira bebama. Al data Reb Lezer, maushtik sheira um, bebama. Now, this is only going according to Reb Lezer because he holds that yavi b'damer oila. That's Reb Meir sheet. According to the Chachamim, it goes in the Siba, so you would never have such a case happen. So it's only according to Reb Lezer. So what about according to Reb Lezer? Can I go and I bring it now in the Bama Ketana? So the Gemara says Nishmin and Menado, and then Nishmin and Ado. Zeh klal kol shenidav v'nidav karev bebama v'chol she'ena loy nidav v'loy nidav ena kar bebama. And therefore, since the source carbon over here is an asham, which is not nidav, an asham can only bring if you do an aver. You can't just bring an asham whenever you want. So therefore, the oil which comes mikar asham cannot be brought in the bama kedana. And Reb Chaim asks over here, Reb Chaim Kanievsky asks, he says, understand. Why is this different than the Pesach? Pesach is the same thing. Pesach also. What's this? We said before a second ago. The Gemara said Shlomo, no problem, you can bring it, even though it's coming mikach the Pesach. So whatever. Why is this different? Okay, didn't give an answer. Amr Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina, ein habam and eteres el ben navi. Once the bamas became aser, that was the time of the base Mikdash. The only way for it to become mutter is with a navi. With a navo, my timer. So where do we see this from? Hisham lecha pen tala lesecha b'chol makom ashetire. Kima makom. So you see the pasuk Yo makri b'shas iser habam. So how was he able to do that? So Amrab Samloin, that's what he said. Dibura Amalei. He had a dibura. Kadosh Baruch Hu gave him a vow and said he should build a mizbeach. And where do we see this from? Because you see in the pasuk over there it says uvidvarecha asisi, ubidiburcha asisi. Now, with the nevuah that he got from Hashem, that's how he made the carbon. So even though it's also to bring even though it's also to build a bama, once Beis Mikdash was built, Elio had a specific nevuah telling him to do it.